Okay.
I guess we'll give a few minutes to let people join.
Yeah. Just want to make sure we've got everything down here.
And this is my second one, so if you want to say it's good to have you back, that's fine too.
Okay, sure.
So you know how these go.
Yeah.
Less, yes. Okay, so we'll just get started in just a couple minutes. We've got a few folks joining.
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and broadcast. Let's see. Okay, fabulous. So we are, looks like about to be live, but let's go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today at our monthly rewards mastermind webinar. So if you're new today, this is a talk that we have every second Tuesday of the month. And really the goal is for us to focus on just some of the hot topics and ideas in the world of rewards with expert guests, speakers from all over the world, different types of industries. So we'll have them come in and share their experience and their expertise with our guests and of course ourselves. So as you know, and as you can see on the screen, the topic today is around the importance of upskilling. So we have our wonderful guest, Linda, back with us. And before we get started on this exciting topic, we'll just do a brief round of intros, and then we can go ahead and dive in. So from the comp team side, we've got myself, I'm Victoria Kiseliva. I'm one of the consultants here at comp team. We've also got Howard and Jackson with us. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to you, Linda, to just do a brief intro and talk to us about your background, how you got into this, and a little bit about TalentGuard as well.
Awesome, thanks. Super excited to be here. I am Linda Ginac. I am the founder and CEO of TalentGuard, which is an HR software company based out of Austin, Texas, and we focus on helping organizations upskill, reskill, develop, and engage employees. And I got into software based on a previous business, actually, where I spent about 15 years helping individuals first make successful career transitions. And as part of career transition, you have to help somebody recognize the skills that they have now and how they want to apply those skills in the future. And, being so passionate about that led me to, creating a software platform that would bring it to the masses.
You have quite the interesting background, Linda. I was looking at your bio and had a number of different roles over your career. And you were involved in, as you mentioned, the career coaching. You were in product strategy, you were in marketing. You have a successful track record of bringing technology to the market. How would you, evolve into this role now from your past? I also understand you're an author of a book as well.
Too, yeah. Yeah. It was a little bit organic, to be honest. Like you said, I started my career in marketing, and I had always been part of technology companies, marketing products, new products, go-to-market strategy, brand, corporate communications. And as I grew in my career, both in skill and expertise and in market knowledge, I really migrated toward being really attracted to the product strategy side. Like, how do you know what customers need? How do you solve pains of customers? then how do you translate that into a product that can solve real world problems? So I really, as I continue to grow, shifted from more the Marcom to the product requirements, then to the product strategy. And it was just a natural evolution as I grew in my responsibility as a leader and a manager and a VP. I could see gaping holes in helping not only myself get to where I wanted to be. There was no clear line, and somebody, being the puppeteer, helping me to move up. I had to earn every job that I landed in. Same for the employees. I was trying to look at it as, how can I help them understand the skills that they have, that they can apply not only in my job, but across the organization, and get more work done faster. And so it just stemmed out of that need to serve a need, fill a need, and solve a problem. And that's really what led me to the coaching business that I did. And then that ultimately leading me to running a software company that is 100% focused on that mission.
And when companies seek your services, what are they trying to accomplish, and how do you help them get there?
Great questions. A lot of organizations, I would say pre-COVID and even a little bit post-COVID, typically would focus on the need of helping employees be better engaged in their career, which would ultimately translate them being better engaged with the company. But more so over the last 18 months in particular, we are seeing a consistent need coming in where organizations are saying that they need to keep pace with change. They need to figure out how to stay more competitive. And what that ultimately translates to for us is helping them recognize that that disruption is happening now, and it will continue to happen. How do they as an organization recognize how job disruption and skill disruption and new technology transformation, digital transformation, is going to force organizations, whether they want to or not, make change? And how do you foster change? And that change really is all about people. If I have to bring in new tech stacks, whether it's HR tech, fintech, marketing tech, sales tech, IT tech, organizations are being forced to change with new modern technologies. And with that change comes a need and an ability to make sure that employees can be prepared for that change. And so, most people tend to be a little bit resistant, as organizations are themselves. So you have to find ways and methods that really help organizations upskill and reskill at scale. And that is a need that TalentGuard fills well. And we fill it well because we bring data to the table, we bring software to the table, and then we plug into an existing ecosystem that already exists so that organizations don't have to unhook everything. We just kind of fit in nicely and figure out, where the data needs to reside in order to make business decisions. So yeah, a real strong focus on skilling and upskilling.
And how would you define upskilling, right? So does it always involve skills that are already existing and it builds on them, or can it be a completely unrelated set of skills that you focus on, or all of the above? What's kind of the most prominent areas?
Well, great question. We get that a lot. And when you think about, let's take digital transformation, or even let's take a slice of an industry. Let's think about insurance, because they tend to be quite the laggards when it comes to adopting new technology and even evolving their employee workforce. Let's even kind of whittle it down to a particular job. If we think about the claims adjuster, that I think there are about 238,000 claims adjusters in the US. And it is anticipated that 50% of people in that role will be in some other role because of technology and advances. So what role will they be in? So we have to be able to understand that if you and I are going to use our cell phones, our mobile devices, to become our own claims adjusters, what is going to be happening on the back end if we're able to process claims faster, smarter, more intelligently? We're going to need people that understand technology in a different way, rather than a cell phone going out, taking pictures, bringing these physical assets back to the office and putting it in a file and passing it to the next desk. we've got to think about that that's going to be totally transformed. So one way to look at that is to look at somebody in a role and say, well, if our people today are in a claims adjuster role, what is that new role going to be? How are we going to forecast what skills are going to be important in that new role? And then how do we understand the talent that we have now and the gap that we have? So that's supply and demand, and then begin thinking about this future of work in the context of talent pools, so we can mass upskill at scale. And when we think about an upskill, it's upskilling employees to what that next role might be versus reskilling somebody for something completely different, marketing going into business analytics. So we kind of look at the world that way, where it's, if you're going to reskill, it's for something else. If you're going to upskill, it's for something that's quite similar, but may take on a different look of what that role might be. And that's really how we classify it here at TalentGuard.
And what are typically the drivers for upskilling? So is it proactive? Is it reactive? Is it driven?
Yeah, it's all of the above. You're going to have some organizations that, like for, let's say IT services as an example, where their talent is their product. And if you have an IT services company that are serving the people who are already engaged in digital transformation, they're expected to have talent that is already prepared, trained, and experienced on these evolving technologies. So they have to transform at the pace of change if they're going to win those bids or those tenders to continue to help those organizations evolve. Then you're going to have on the other spectrum organizations who did not evolve with the pace of change, and their employees, for whatever reason, are coming in saying, we're not going to use those technologies, they're outdated. They seem very, backwards. And if you want to capture the younger generation, then you better institute technologies that are going to enable us to evolve and not to stay in something that is old or status quo. We want to evolve with the times. So then they're forced to change for some of those reasons. But whatever reason that people are coming to us for, we first have to understand their need. What is driving change in that organization? And then we really try to box in, the priorities in order. What is the work that needs to be done? And then what are those jobs that are required to do the work that needs to be done? And then within those jobs, what are the critical skills that are needed? We got to take that perspective and then figure out, well, then what is the talent that needs to be applied, in that role? Do we have that talent today? If not, how you got to make the decision of how long will it take to upskill versus hiring that talent within. And it's typically a dual track where organizations need to bring in both, need to upskill their internal talent at some pace, at some accelerated pace, and then you need to also hire from the external. So looking at that talent pipeline, which is very difficult to do in organizations, because sometimes the technologies don't exist to do both at the depth that an organization needs to make those decisions, or there's so many systems that are disparate, we can't bring it all together for a single view. So the task is quite daunting, hence why PwC put out there that 84% of reskilling, upskilling efforts fail.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is it because companies aren't forward thinking enough, or what do you think is causing that?
Well, we've seen a lot of different reasons. Number one, it kind of falls into three buckets, and I'll say it's sometimes about the data, sometimes about the tech stacks, and it's sometimes about the ecosystem. So let's break down the data first. As you know, you guys are experts in job architecture, right? And then compensation architecture that goes along with that. Some organizations will come in and make the investment that is needed to build out a job architecture, but they won't take it to the next level, or sometimes they will take it to the next level and build out what I'm going to call the career architecture, which is building out the job descriptions and the skill-based job descriptions in order to support that change. So sometimes organizations either have the data and the data is really, really old because it took them 18 to 24 months to get there. And no one wants to deal with outdated, job descriptions and outdated data. So companies need to look at having a system in place where that data is being updated in real time. In real time, I'm going to say maybe on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis, but not every 18 to 24 months. And that's really hard to do. So having the right skill-based taxonomies and the right skill descriptions that are connected to the right jobs or gigs, where the HR team and the subject matter experts don't have to spend 2 years getting it up to date, and they have that data real time, is critical. That's that data component. And then really mapping, having an accelerated way to map skills to jobs, if they do have a beautiful job architecture, is critical. When I say accelerate, we've got to, if you're onboarding a new customer and they have, say they have 11,000 job titles and they're bloated, right? You have to have a very clean way to clean the data up to get it to pure profiles, which might be 2,400, and then apply those profiles to people, right? So that's that first part, having the right data. But then that right data, the only way that you can accelerate it is through technology. And you have to enable the AI agents and the machine learning models to do 80% of the work, so that HR only has to deal with 20% of the work and not leave it up to most organizations, which they'll have multiple systems, they'll have multiple relationship with skill vendors or job description vendors or applicant tracking vendors or HRIS vendors. And then so what happens is you have this very complicated ecosystem where skills live everywhere. You have multiple definitions of skills. Some skills don't have definitions. Some organizations, some job families within the organizations might be further or more mature than other departments in an organization. So you have different levels of readiness and maturity internally. So how do you get the organization ready fast so that everybody can look the same? We can have normalized data, we can have normalized jobs. And then the third part is apply that data so that then we can begin to look at talent in a fair and inclusive way. The only way that you can do that is through diagnostics, right? You got to start with some form of a talent assessment. That's not a one and done, but an ongoing thing that you can look at as the employee upskills, as they change jobs, as they change departments, as they engage in gigs, so that you can look at employees on a day in and a day out basis at the team level and at an organization. And then the ecosystem simply is, if you've now invested the time and effort to have a system of record or a system of truth for job and skill data, then that data has to be able to have bilateral relationships to the applicant tracking system, the HRIS system, the LMS system, the comp system, the reward system, so that everything can stay in sync. Otherwise, we're gonna be fostering the problem in a bigger way, which is, again, having that job bloat, having that skill bloat. And it's just got to be simple and it's got to be easy, because no one really wants to have job governance take the time that it used to. That's how I would answer that.
I remember my first job was interviewing all the incumbents and writing up the job descriptions and going back and forth to the incumbent and their manager. It took forever, and it was an ever-going project. So
always, and then you're done, and then someone takes that job description, changes 3 lines or adds 3 different skills, and suddenly you have 47 different ways to describe a project manager. But when you run it through an AI, they're like, wow, there's only like 15% difference. Let the difference live in the kind of work that gets done. But let's, from a legal point of view, let's standardize it so that it doesn't live just within an organization. What we found over time, bringing in a lot of market data, looking at customer spending endless hours, like you just said, updating the data, looking at the data that we're standardizing and normalizing across organizations, across states, across the country, across the globe. There's really not a lot of difference in the way that somebody describes a job role. So let's standardize on some of this stuff so that we can focus on other things that matter, like getting the work done and understanding the probability of that.
So do the employees then take ownership over their own career development? Is that how it moves along? Or?
That's all across the board. You're going to see just different cross sections of the way that people manage their careers. There are there are generations, like my generation, where we came in and we were told that no one's going to help you. You need to make it happen for yourself. So we're going to take ownership of our career. And typically, because we were those parents, the generation underneath them expect an employer to facilitate and foster their career. And it's a joint collaborative effort. And then you're going to have a segment of the population, quite frankly, baby boomers and older, and they're like, well, I've had that acceleration. Now I don't want to accelerate anymore. What I want to do is I like the job that I'm in, but maybe I want to decelerate and not have forced retirement. And we need to be able to support that perspective, as well as how can we allow the people that have invested decades in the workforce to not travel 75% of the time, but we want to maintain that institutional knowledge that can help the younger generation, avoid the mistakes that we've learned along the way. So how can you allow someone to decelerate? And we've got to think as HR leaders and as ELTs that there are ways for people to retire or decelerate in much more strategic ways than we have in the past, which is goodbye. You've hit a certain age limit and you're basically no longer, able to work here,
Right.
which has its pros and cons, because we do need to make room for the next generation to be able to rise up in those roles. Right.
Right. But you lose that, institutional knowledge that could be shared and used to develop, the younger employees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Linda, earlier you mentioned the relationship between upskilling and then bringing in talent from the external workforce. As we get into a really tight job market right now, does that just place a greater emphasis on the upskilling, or do you think we still need to have that relationship between the two?
Great question. And we get this all the time, even from our customers. I think we have to do many things. We have to make significant, if you look at the learning chart, and I wish I had this right on my computer, the investment trend in employees over the past 5 years is declining radically. So they're leaving it up to the devices of employees to figure out how to learn in the flow of work, which is the wrong thing to do. We have to place a higher emphasis on making sure that employees are equipped and able to do the jobs. And we have to do that because, even if you let's just take data scientists, or even application engineers or software engineers. We're not even graduating enough in the university systems to be able to fill the gap. We have massive gaps there. So if we are upskilling and reskilling with the current talent, and if we're not having enough people graduate from the university systems because they're making other choices in life, and it might be that they just want to go right to work and they're taking work readiness programs. So we have to look at how are we going to fill the gap if it's non-traditional students that are not going through the university system, but might be going through a boot camp or a different type of readiness program. We still have gaps, and we have employers looking at all the ways with which we are able to find talent to fill the roles that matter. And this is where identifying the roles that matter, what are the critical roles to get the work done, and what talent do you have now? Because not all roles are critical. You're going to have your A, B, and C roles, and organizations are really looking at, what roles can't we live without, and how do we fill the gaps on those first and foremost, and then the next layer, and then the next layer. They're not just looking at, oh, let me get roles in a particular job family first and second, right? It's really about looking at a cross-section across the organization, figuring out what those are, and making sure they have enough people in the talent pool based on what they think, whether they're having a new go-to-market strategy, a new product entry, whether they're growing through acquisition, whether they're growing into new markets, right? All of those are different strategies that will make your particular roles critical, right? If I'm driving higher profitability is different than if I have a strategy to be more efficient, and I have to think about it that way. So I mean, ELTs are thinking about these things in the executive boardroom, but when they come out and they say to the HR team and the managers, well, what talent do you have to be able to fill the gap so that we can support the future of work? Nobody is stepping up to the plate saying, I have the answer. There's not enough data analytics running through the system and our BI tools saying, hey, let me show you everybody that we have, and let me show you where the gaps are, because we've done a very poor job over time of enabling this diagnostic talent assessment to run across all career transitions internally. We're not really equipped and nor are we tracking the number of transitions that have happened. LinkedIn does a better job than we do internally, which is why all of us data people want that big data pulling in from LinkedIn so we can track, oh, wow, this person has actually been at my company for X amount of time and they've had, 30 transition and have gained these skills, right? So it's a big complex problem.
If folks want to start taking a look at upskilling initiatives internally, who's typically responsible for leading these types of initiatives? I'm assuming it will have to do with, obviously, the HR function being responsible for the job description, but also the function, whether it's sales or tech or whatever, to actually identify the need, right? So it's
Love it. Love it. And we've seen actually over, like I said, over the last 6 to 9 months, more of a functional leadership push. And then HR is supporting and driving change, but we'll have a function reach out and say, I have a critical problem. And that critical problem could still be churn, or it could still be engagement. But what we're seeing, it's the functions that are closest to serving the customer. So it could be field service, where we have to send field service engineers out to fix something on site, whether it's a supply chain, whether it's a medical device imaging unit, whether it's, it's something massive. So they need people to show up. We're seeing a lot of leads in IT services, where talent is the product, and supply chain manufacturing, where humans usually are at the center, right? So we see that first and foremost. And once they lead with that, usually it's three job families that they'll lead with, and those tend to be the ones that are causing the most pain. Then it will ripple through the rest of the organization. But those kind of three job families are the stem cells for getting the growth for the rest of the organization happening. And then it becomes this psychological backbone that is established, where we can demonstrate real ROI. We can understand the time, the resources, and learning that it takes to make it happen. And you have some proof points where, where you have success at scale. And then you use that as leverage to demonstrate to the rest of the organization that it's possible that you can upskill and reskill at scale, and it can be successful, and it can be a joint initiative. And there's real business outcomes that can be managed and monitored over time if you invest the effort to make it happen. And it is an investment, and it does take time. But the organizations who see it through and they think about it strategically, it's not going to happen overnight. But if you plan it, usually the first step is, let's make sure that we can build success on our job architecture and do it, at a snap of a finger versus a longer time. Let's clean that up first as step one. Step two is, now let's engage in a diagnostic to understand the talent that we have. Then we're going to match that against the talent that we need, right? That's how we begin identifying the gap strategically. And then you begin an upskilling and reskilling learning-centric journey where everybody is learning. You're monitoring it. You're monitoring the level of skills that are gaining over time. And then the transitions happen. Okay, now we need to transition you into these new roles. And it's not easy to transition internally either. Lots of things have to happen, right? Lots and lots of steps. And then you enable that. And then you kind of repeat that process. So it does happen in a nice sequential pipeline, if you will, in an organization.
Well, what measures are you looking at when it comes to determining the success of the upskilling process?
You're gonna first and foremost look at, let's just go back to the claims adjuster talent pool. We said, all right, we're going to go from traditional claims adjusters who were required to go out on site and take pictures. And now we need somebody with more business analytics skills, more processing skills. Let's say the skill profile is different. Did we successfully, if we have 200 here and we need 400, did we successfully transition the 200 into that role? And then what was the loss of that? How many people left the organization? How many people moved into a different role that was not understood? How long did it take us to upskill? How many learning resources did it take to upskill? What was the learning like? Was it informal? i.e. it maybe was fireside chats and mentors, or formal, i.e. learning courses and simulations and on-the-job training. And we look at that, and then once they're in that transitionary period, how long did it take to perform at the optimum level required of the job, right? That's where your performance data is going to start to kick in. And then from that point, what is the impact to the business? Did we reduce churn? Did we increase customer satisfaction rates? Are we winning more business? Do we have happier employees? Are we able to process more claims and do it in a higher quality manner, in a faster pace? Those sorts of things. And you think about those KPIs with the start of each of those engagements. It's not just about how many times did the employee click the assessment. You know, usage metrics are for the vendor and also for the organizations, right? But it's more than just clicks in a software application. It's about what is going on behind the scenes in order to prepare and make people ready.
The culture in an organization, plays a large role in how change is perceived. Do you ever experience situations where employees are resistant to the upskilling process because change is scary to them?
Change management is the hardest of anything, right? You can get the data right. You can have the right software. And then when it comes time to launch and support adoption, it's a big uplift. It's a big uplift for HR. It's a big uplift for managers. It's a big uplift for employees, because we have to psychologically, we have to create a safe place, because employees naturally feel like if I'm being assessed, they're going to use the data against me. So it takes a tremendous internal marketing communication program. And we're always saying, get marketing involved when we're ready to launch, because it's not just an HR initiative, it's a company-wide initiative. And you have to have everybody speaking, from the executive leader, the CEO, the ELT team. We have to get the managers to support the transitions and change, because one of the factors is, as you're upskilling, you need to speak to other subject matter experts. Oftentimes, if you have say you have a human resource manager, meaning a manager that is managing a team, sometimes that manager may not have the technical expertise to be able to assess somebody accurately. So then what? Well, then you have to either have a center of competence to help with that assessment, or you have to have a subject matter expert who can provide that input. So then you have a technical expert providing input on technical skills. And then you have your traditional manager providing input on human skills or foundational skills or interpersonal skills. And that has to come together in an organized way. And then you have to be able to, as an employee, talk about, hey, this is, they want to talk about it. This is what I'm doing. Do you think this is the good book? Is this even though we're recommending it, is that the right resource to help me upskill? Okay, well, now I'm ready for a project. I want to actually test my skills out and learn as I'm going. So you have to have people that are willing to let you fail, right? It has to be fail safe. So if I try this on and I fail, am I going to be fired, or are they going to truly see that as a learning simulation before I make the actual transition? So it is a company-wide effort that needs lots of different communication along the way to foster a safe place to upskill and reskill. And then you also have to foster those transitions to happen. If we're upskilling and reskilling, no transitions ever happen, then it's going to fall flat on its face, right? So you got to enable people to move, which means we have to eliminate the fear for managers to hoard talent. So if managers understand that there's other talent that can move into their group, so that other talent can move out, that has to happen in a cascaded fashion. And then we have to allow those employees time to perform up to a minimum standard of the job. So what is the minimum standard, right? We have to be very clear and transparent about what is expected, so that, if I get somebody in the job, I'm not going to evaluate them like some expert. I'm going to evaluate them at a novice level. So culture is a big part. Yeah, 100%. And I think that really is one of the most important factors to the success or failure of any initiative.
Does
Definitely.
upskilling typically result in pay bumps for employees that do take on bigger jobs, or what does that look like?
It could, right? It just depends on how you're thinking about it, right? If you're thinking about upskilling for a different role, a lot of upskilling can be lateral moves, because we might be doing work in the same job grade, but it might be a different job title, but it might be tied to the same pay structure. And then you might have those that are able to move up. So they may be upskilling or reskilling to a management role. So that's going to be very different for each organization. Also, you're going to have to factor in the global structure. What might, you might have a pay grade of, pretend it's 6 and the next one up is a 5 in the US. But if you're thinking about a country, different country, they might have a higher grade level, but the pay scale might be different, right? This is where it gets extremely complex. Because when people are looking at career moves, some organizations might want to expose grades, like in India. That's a very important factor. And people look for careers based on grade levels, but they tend to have more in between grades because they need to move up faster versus, the US compared to Canada. We might have job titles that are exactly the same, but in Canada, it might be a higher grade level at a higher pay versus in the US. We also have that within the country, within the United States, right? It might be that job falls into a different band within California than it does in Texas because the cost of living is a lot higher. So it's, you have to think about, organizations need to think about that and have a software system that supports that level of flexibility.
Before you mentioned COVID, I'm interested, how did COVID affect your business and what did you need to do to adapt?
COVID slammed our business. And, pre-COVID, we were really focused on being the career pathing company, right? We wanted to help people understand what's next and really be proactive about, preparing themselves for that next role. But what HR was focused on is getting people remote, making sure that they could focus on wellness, making sure that employees knew what resources they had when they were going through emotional distress. Then you had IT teams thinking about cybersecurity and making sure that data is safe. So they had to institute net technologies. They were not really focused for almost 2 years about helping employees get to the next level or get to the next career or upskilling and reskilling. It was really post-COVID where that became important again. And so while we were going through COVID, we were really thinking about, well, if it's not the career path, what is really going to be the next trend and how can we make it easier for organizations to build the foundation that they're going to need to support this after. And so we've retooled and we pivoted, focusing more on the upstream that's where we launched our Intelligent Role Studio, which accelerates the skill to job mapping and calibration and getting the assessment data that they needed. So yeah, it was a very painful transition for TalentGuard in particular, but the organizations that put us on hold came back at the end of 2022 and really the beginning of 2023 with a mission that was even greater than before. So it wasn't a buy, it was a halt that now we're seeing pick up with greater momentum and speed and greater urgency. So while it was painful, it gave us the time that we needed to make sure that we're focused on the right things. And that was a good move on our part. Yeah.
So for those people in our audience that are listening to this and seeing all the benefits of upskilling, what are the typical downfalls? You mentioned that the majority of upskilling efforts fail. What should people be watching out for as they implement this or try to?
Yep. First and foremost, one of the key things that I appreciate, and I think my sales team and my CS team would appreciate is it's important for HR to understand the landscape that we have. And what I mean by this is most of the time, HR technology companies are called an HR tech stack. We're not an HR tech stack because we don't just serve HR. If you think about that, if you say you have a marketing tech stack, that's you typically use just by marketing, or if it's a sales tech stack, it's only used by sales. But in HR, it's different. HR, it's not an HR tech stack. It's a corporate-wide system that manages daily decisions of our entire staff, employees, managers, HR business partners, HR, and executives. So understanding the different technologies that they have internally, I think is really good because it makes it hard on a vendor like TalentGuard, where an organization has 7 HRIS systems, 9 LMS systems, 2 compensation systems, 5 different skills databases. They have job descriptions in PowerPoint, Excel, Word documents, and they go, okay, we're ready to go. And they don't have a strategy internally, and they're expecting the vendor to come up with the strategy. It's just, that's just not good business, because it's not our job to do that. So really understanding what is the outcome, what is having a talent strategy first and foremost, and having some basic job architecture makes our life easier, because we can build really, really quickly a strategy for you. Because sometimes they'll say, hey, we want you to integrate with these 2 LMSs, LinkedIn Learning, Get Abstract. And I say, well, that, for example, Get Abstract lives in LinkedIn Learning. Do you want to have 2 subscriptions? Do you want to duplicate the work? What happens if one goes away and the other one resides? Or do you want us to connect to your LMS because you're using SCORM to import everything and it lives there as well, right? So people have to think strategically about data, because it really starts with the data. It starts with the data, which means it starts with understanding the skills that are needed, how it's applied to a job, and then how learning and coaching and interview guides and development options and learning recommendations are going to be based on some type of taxonomy. And it really isn't TalentGuard deciding what that should be. It's an internal decision about what works for your blue collar workforce, what works for your white collar. Sometimes they're different, but knowing what you want to quote unquote standardize on, and knowing the purpose, right? Because we are often the source of truth for data. How do you want that data to support your applicant tracking strategy? Do you want the data to live there so that we have harmonious data from when you publish it on the website, people are applying, you want to tie the requisitions back? What data do you want to live in the HRIS? What are your systems of truth for your learning data? And then what are your exceptions for that? And having a key understanding of that makes the onboarding process go much smoother, so that you can deploy faster and you can see an ROI faster. So it really starts with the HR team understanding all the different tech stacks that they have and all the different descriptions. And I know that's really hard to do, but at least starting that process before you're looking for a potential partner helps the partner tremendously, whether it's TalentGuard or some other vendor. And I think having a handle on that is key. And then because that key, like I said, it helps us drive an ROI faster, so that it doesn't lead to, a year deployment, and we can launch in 6 to 8 weeks with your first few critical job families, so that we can communicate when the CEO says, how is it going? We can have HR go to the table and say, let us tell you where we're at.
Can you give us an example of a success story, in terms of the beginning and where it ended up?
Gosh, we have several, and I'll describe the success story in terms of, you might have, it could be whether it's telecom, IT services, CPG. Typically, the first question that we'll ask is, how many job titles do you have? Or have you done the work of doing a job classification where you've already normalized and cleaned up your job architecture? So we have a key understanding there. And, sometimes they'll say, oh, we have, 10,000 job titles. And I'm like, well, of the 10,000 job titles, do you know how much duplication you have, right? We really want to gain an understanding of that first, because we want to clean that up. And we want it, we truly, TalentGuard, we think of TalentGuard, we'll take job titles, and our whole first step, that's why we call it foundational, is to eliminate the duplication, eliminate the bloat, so that we can operate on truly helping people make the transition internally. So we consolidate, standardize, and accelerate that first. And so an example would be, organization comes in, has 10,000 job titles, ends up with 2,300 standardized ones that are all mapped back to the employees, and the employees can keep their fancy job titles. We don't want to take that away. But they realize at that point, oh my gosh, we've been doing it wrong this whole time. We can have multiple different job descriptions or multiple different job titles mapped to a single job classification profile and continue to work, but have it be clean. And so we do a lot of that work fast. We do it, I'm talking, months, not years. So we start there, and then what happens is that data then starts to clean up the applicant tracking system, the HRIS system, and other systems. And then that's when they realize, like, oh wow, we can simplify. It is easy. If I use the data that TalentGuard is providing out of the box without having to edit a lot of it, because they've already done the hard work of understanding what's trending in the market, and it will work for your organization and it will work for other organizations. If they start there, we can get live fast. And I think that's a great thing. And then the next logical thing is now getting that data, putting that data to work. And for us, it means talent assessment. But then the next thing, it means developing the employees, which that's where the learning plan and the action plan become important, because we're a one-to-many system. We're going to link out to your LMS. We're going to link out to a coach. We're going to link out to your SharePoint for your standard operating procedures. There might be multiple LMSs for different reasons. And we can bring that single point of view where they still leverage that ecosystem. We don't want you to get rid of it, but we want to leverage it in the right way. And then we want to leverage your applicant tracking system in the right way. When there's a vacancy, we want to pass you out in the right way to show that this one role has 100 different vacancies across the globe, and we can manage that in a good way. And we don't have to have the duplication. So, so if you start with a foundation, which I think everybody should do, then you can just roll it out from there when your organization is ready. But it doesn't take years. We take out 80% of the inefficiency. And we've proven that over and over in many different industry segments, very, very large organizations to organizations that have 1,000 employees. And it kind of goes to a little bit of trust. And that's why we say, all right, 3 job families and someone's going to trust us. They're going to go, wow, we don't actually have to edit a lot of the job and the skill data that you're giving us, Linda. It's pretty on target. And now we think we can just run from here. So it kind of goes crawl, and then they're kind of toddling around, and then they're jogging, and then they're running. And that just takes time for the HR team to trust us, time for the SMEs to trust us. And we hope that we can even accelerate that more. So yeah, it's about trust in the relationship as you begin a journey like that as well. Yeah.
Are there certain trends or maybe common themes that you're seeing with specific either functions that you're working with, or even different industries that you can share?
Yes, we're seeing a lot of requests in manufacturing and supply chain, insurance, financial services, IT services. And then in those particular healthcare, yeah, it's kind of across the board. But within those, they're using talent to deliver work, whether it's the field service, operating the supply chain, nurses delivering the service on the front end. It's a strong component of something that's customer facing, like true customer facing, and having to deliver something on the fly in industries that are changing because of digital disruption, digital transformation, AI and ML, forcing, actually adding enhancements where they can do the work where a person normally did it, because it's just repetitive tasks, that sort of thing. Yeah. So like I said, field service, sales, customer support, those sorts of things.
Do you see any big changes looming or disruptions in the future?
I always say the future of work is now, not 5 or 10 years from now. And I think that organizations are feeling it. They are looking at, what does it take? They have to think about what is the work that needs to get done first and foremost. And then, how complex is the industry? How complex is the change that is happening? What are the new skill sets that are needed? What is the probability that we have the skill sets internally? How fast can we upskill our own talent? Is there talent outside that we can recruit in at the right compensation? And what are the resources that we're going to look at in order to do that? I mean, these are big, complex problems, and there's no one easy answer, and they just have to break that out. And where's the biggest pain first? And then evolve it from there, really. Even when you think about the transformation from manual when I say manual, I don't mean like manual in terms of a stick shift, but, you know, cars that require gasoline to electronic cars, you know, just given that the EV sector, we're having to just upskill just on a particular proponent of EV, because you've got different policies, you have different regulations, you have different technologies, you have different expectations. It requires a different skill set. There aren't enough universities that are pumping out people with the right skills to perform in those jobs, and it's evolving at a rapid pace. State laws are being put into effect. So if you even think about that, that alone, if you think about that one particular industry, causes, you know, a rapid adoption of technologies like TalentGuard to keep pace with that beyond IT services. Yeah, it's quite an effort.
Yeah,
And all that's just the need to drive data, so that they can make decisions. TalentGuard has data. We generate data. You know, we have big data. We bring in big data. We're putting out data that's being used in other business analytics tools, because we're only one component of decision making. They get to bring together a lot of different data that is needed to make decisions about an organization's, you know, strategic goals and direction and strategy, and you know, their competitive differentiation and all that. And so, you know, like I said, in that ecosystem, we're providing data about people, but there's a lot more data that needs to be had in order for organizations to compete.
So many initiatives within organizations have, you know, a clear start date and a clear end date. That doesn't really seem like that's true for upskilling and reskilling, is it? You're really just building the framework to continue on into the future.
It's a continuous effort. You nailed it, right? There's no start and stop, except for, you know, I would call it, it's almost like serial time stamping. You have to look at, you know, let's say we have people in a talent pool to upskill our claims adjusters, and they're making the transition, and they're performing in their role. They're also now thinking, what's next? You know, now they're going to be thinking about, now what is that next move? So you're constantly upskilling. Maybe they want to become a supervisor or a technical lead or a manager. So it doesn't ever end. It only ends when the employee says no more and they retire and they're going to go somewhere else. Or, you know, if they go to another company, that upskilling journey is still going to continue. But what I'm saying is that there, just like you have a sales pipeline, and it goes from identifying a prospect and qualifying them and putting them into a pipeline and understanding the needs and getting the contracts, there is an upskilling pipeline. There's a reskilling pipeline. There's an employee development pipeline. And that pipeline is very, very similar. And you have to look at that pipeline. And each of those steps have times that it takes to move through them. And you have to look at it as a very specific business process. Otherwise, right, employees are left to their own devices. I'm going to develop when I need to develop. I'm going to do something when I need to do it. I'm going to find the time rather than create the time. And it's not going to be looked at as an important business process, right? It'll be a little bit more haphazard than that. And it can't be haphazard. Yeah.
And for those listening, you know, I spent a little bit of time on your website, and I see here that the World Economic Forum estimates that half of employees will require reskilling by 2025. So this isn't an isolated problem. It's really going to be everywhere.
It's talked at every level. I mean, if you look at even press releases from organizations like, you know, Walmart and Amazon and PwC and, you know, all the major players, they have all issued statements about upskilling and reskilling. The latest Gartner report that came out, I think it's the #1 top agenda on the issue. I think 59% of the responses that came back said that upskilling and reskilling is the #1 problem, yet 49% of organizations are doing it right. So it's being talked about, you know, with the ELTs. And the question is how, right? How are we going to do that on top of everything else that we do? And it can't take forever. And, you know, what's the right enabling factors that make it happen? Is it multiple vendors with best of class? Is it a single vendor? How do we leverage the existing contracts that we have? You know, they're big discussions.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. Lots to think about.
Are there a lot of competitors in the same space? And how would you say your firm differs from them?
Yeah, I think you have, I mean, obviously you're going to have competitors coming at it from learning management, right? So you went from learning to the LXP, and you see learning vendors really thinking about how to add skills and skill strategy into the mix. You have traditional career pathing vendors. You have, companies like Pluralsight that are very, very focused on upskilling in, the IT sector. You have a lot of different players approaching it from many different avenues. It's not an easy thing. Yeah, it's kind of confusing, actually.
How would you say you differ from those folks?
Well, people ask this a lot, and sometimes they want to pigeonhole us and say, well, TalentGuard is a jobs company, and we're not really a jobs company. We have started as and always been a skills focused company, and skills attach to many things. They attach to jobs, they attach to gigs, they attach to a lot of different things, right? So you kind of have the foundation and it builds on from there. So we have always been from the very, very get-go, very focused on the data. So helping to get the right data at the right time for the right industries that are having the biggest problems so that organizations could get started quickly. So we have data that help organizations build the foundation that they need very quickly. And we have the software. And we have, many of not our entire software is not AI driven. I think that's super crazy. We're able to show exactly how AI is applied within our technology to show how transformation can happen, how we can eliminate a lot of the work that HR and the SMEs have to do up front to get to the place where they need to be. And then we have to plug into the ecosystem. We know that we can't solve all the problems, that we're just a piece in the mix, but we want to make sure that they can operate on a common language. And that tends to be the job and the skill definitions. So if we can standardize on that in our technology and beyond, where they can operate on the same type of data and all the other systems, then we feel like we've done a good job. So those would be the three areas that TalentGuard brings to the table: the data, the technology, which is a platform that allows you to make informed decisions, and then hook into the broader network to enable the upskilling to happen, the internal transitions through the applicant tracking system, the reward system to reward employees for doing that type of work, and then to drive the transformation. That's what I would say.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, we're coming to the top of the hour here, and this has been such an insightful conversation. How should our listeners reach out to you, Linda, if they're interested in TalentGuard?
I think the easiest way would be our website, www.talentguard.com, all one word. They can read about the leadership team, they can read case studies, they can look at how we form packages for how do you get started, what's step one, and they can request a demo, and that will feed right into our marketing and sales team.
Great.
Thank you.
Is there anything we left out that you want to have covered?
You guys had a lot of questions, tough questions. Yeah, I think you've asked a lot of informative questions, and if anybody else out there has questions, I'm happy to answer them if there's time, or you can again use request a demo or info@talentguard.com to request a question. I'm happy to make sure that we answer those for you. Yeah.
Wonderful. So as Jackson mentioned, we're right at time, so I think we can go ahead and wrap up just a few minutes early. So thank you for your time, Linda, and sharing some much needed context and expertise in this continuously changing environment. So thank you very much. We really appreciate your time, and thank you for everybody joining today.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Linda.
Thanks.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.